Dark Peace by Dana Lee. Chapter 13. After a fine Christmas breakfast of fried ham, potatoes, and dried cranberries, they walked in silence towards the cemetery just beyond the way. Dark birds hovered and jeered above their heads. Lee felt miserable to be dressed in black on Christmas Day. It was cold. The graves were covered in a shroud of snow. Upon returning home, they exchanged gifts. Michael had a new pair of much-needed boots for Glenn, who stared at them in horror. The rebels stole the boots off our dead. They took their pants and coats, too. There are going to be a bunch of blue-coated rebels running around. How will we know the difference? Miss McBrien made him a new coat out of the best wool. Lee made a new red scarf and gloves. Jenny made him a little leather housewife stocked with paper and pens, needle and thread, even a little pair of scissors. "Oh, Lee, open your gift from Mrs. Olson. I've been wondering what it could be. I'm sure it's something fine," Jenny implored her. It had been eating her up inside to open that gift. It was wrapped in gold paper with a white bow and a sprig of holly. Inside, tucked in tissue, was the most beautiful green silk dress she had ever seen. Little pearls hung from around the low-cut collar and tiny puffed sleeves to cling to the fat parts of her little white arms. Also inside was a watercolor of Lee's head and shoulders, dressed in her new dress, her hair falling down in ringlets of auburn curls. "Oh, it's beautiful," Jenny sighed. "Go put it on." And she did, so glad to shed her sad black. As she descended the stairs, Ernest said, "You look beautiful," and Glenn agreed. "Lord, the fairies are liable to steal her away," Michael said. "Where will you ever wear that?" Miss McBrien asked. She had made a new holiday dress for Lee herself of green gingham with the matching trimmed apron, a much more sensible dress, she thought. And it would have been the finest dress she owned if not for the new gown from Paris that made her feel like a lady. The girls exchanged gifts next. Jenny made a set of white lace gloves for Lee. "They will go with your dress, or most anything." Lee had made the most beautiful red velvet gown for the baby. "Won't she look like a princess?" she asked the new mother. "Lord, a right little devil she'll be in that," commented Miss McBrien. "This is from all of us, including Fritz." Ernest handed Michael a large box wrapped in candy-striped paper. Inside was a beautiful new saddle. There were new aprons, pot holders, and bookmarks for Miss McBrien, and a new hat for Jenny. All around the dinner table they gave thanks to the Lord for what they thought the finest Christmas ever. The magic did not wear off until just after midnight when Glenn went up to bed. "I'm afraid I've got a train to catch in the morning. I have to be off back to Virginia. I didn't want to tell you and spoil the holiday. Thank you. Happy New Year." "What?" Lee was so disappointed. "I thought you could stay at least until after New Year's," Jenny cried. Part 2. Chapter 14. The winter was harsh and blue. Christmas held no comfort for the country's widows, orphans, and families torn to pieces and scattered to the wind. Mrs. Olson returned from New York with 5 beautiful dressing gowns for the baby. When I was there, I saw the most horrifying display, photographs blown up to life size of the dead in Maryland. I believe the photographer's name was Brady. Nobody besides the soldiers themselves, nurses, and those who robbed the dead had ever seen the like. Crowds just stood and stared in awe at the faces of the dead. I'm not sure if this Brady is a grave robber himself, as it seemed so sacrilegious, or else the Chronicle himself. The display caused quite a stir. Most, after recovering from the manic awe of it, turned away revolted in disgust. I think this Brady may be trying to prove a point. I think maybe it is art. I know it shook me to tears. The exposure seemed to change her art forever. No more smiling faces and laughing eyes. Her art became serious, foreboding, and dark. Cherry trees in dappled sunlight became black phantoms of death. Doves became starling, and merry children became lost souls with staring eyes. She too felt thankful that her son was languishing in a rebel prison after seeing the photographs of boys his age blown to bits, skulls smashed, unidentifiable to their own mothers. She was thankful more still that he had survived the unforgiving winter at Belle Isle, which had claimed so many of his comrades. Lee felt a bit guilty in her correspondence with Willie. She felt as if she was encouraging an impossibility. Still, she wanted him alive for everybody's sake, and she got so bored now that Jenny and the baby had moved to the wood farm. The rebel army they read about in the paper was starving due to the Union blockade. They had worn the shoes off of their feet and wore homespun wool and the clothes of dead men. Spring seemed to have more luster that year, but they could not seem to shake a feeling of dread within their hearts. Glenn's letters home became few and further between, as if he no longer had a voice for what his eyes had seen. The spring grew hot, and the fruit trees hung ripe with their wares. The newspapers warned that Lee's army was heading north, and the Union prepared. The railways were stationed with men. The word was out that Lee would attack Harrisburg on his way to Washington. During the last days of June, Lee was in the parlor penning a letter when a banging came at the door. Without waiting for an answer, a dirty Union scout burst in, nearly scaring her to death. "Pardon, miss, but the rebels have overrun Cashtown, 3,000 cavalry. Best head out of town." He was gone up the street to the next house, she presumed, and went into the kitchen to find Miss McBrien. Michael had just sat down for lunch. "Daddy, a soldier was just here, warning that the rebels are in Cashtown. He said that we should leave town right away." "I knows it too. You are to take Miss McBrien along with Fiona to the Woods house and stay there till I comes for you." "As long as you are staying, sir," Miss McBrien interjected, "I will too." "No, you won't neither. The scout said we should all get away, Daddy. I'll be damned if I'll be leaving me home to the rebels." He took his shotgun down from the wall behind the back door. "Go get yourself packed. Take whatever valuables you can fit next to you in the cart. Go on now, get." Lee ran and threw her dresses, stockings, and nightclothes in her mother's trunk she kept at the foot of the bed. Her heart was pounding in her head, and a strange feeling overcame her, something she was altogether unfamiliar with. "I'm ready," she said. "I'm taking Shiner with me." Michael and Miss McBrien couldn't be budged, but insisted she get away with the horse. "I hear they stole the horses first." "These be cavalry from North Carolina. I don't want you to go alone. Go get Mrs. Olson to go with you. Edward left again for Philadelphia yesterday." Lee went to the house first, but Mary said that she had already left for New York. "She had to catch the train. She told me to say goodbye for her. She was in such a hurry I had to pack for her. She took most of the art and family heirlooms with her." "So you're here alone?" "Yes, don't worry about me. I rather like it at that." Mary was a young unmarried girl from town. She was 23 and had known the Olsons for most of her life. Sweet by nature, she was trusting. She didn't ask many questions and answered even fewer. Pale hair was pulled back tightly from her round face. As always, she wore a plain black dress and clean white apron. A snood in her hair was her idea of dressy. Lee laughed. "Look, Mary, I don't think you fathom the seriousness of the matter. The rebel army is heading this way. I'm going to Jenny's. I cannot go alone, so you must come with me, as my father and housekeeper are too bullheaded to leave the house. He's got a shotgun. I have you. Let's go. Hurry up and pack some clothes and anything valuable. The horses, are they here?" "Yes, they're around back." "Good. You follow me in the carriage, or else I'll follow you. Try not to get too far ahead of me." "No, look, Lee, I can't do that. Nuh-uh." She shook her head. "No, I'm not allowed to take the carriage out by myself. Are you nuts?" "I'm losing time and patience, Mary. Look, are you coming with me? Because if you aren't, I'm tying Fiona to that fine carriage and leaving without you." I'll get there all that much faster for it." "You will not. I will have to report you." Again she laughed. "Last chance. I'm leaving now, with or without you. I have to. I'm sorry, Mary, but the rebels are coming to steal the horses." She didn't know it, but they weren't. They were coming for shoes. They didn't know it, but 85,000 Union troops were waiting for them. Chapter 15. Lieutenant Daniel O'Neil was a Louisiana cavalry officer. A finer horseman I've never seen, not even from Virginia. General Lee himself was said to have commented. Whether true or not, he was entirely speculative, but had he Jeb Stuart's position, the Confederates would not be in the position they found themselves in, that is, facing over 85,000 armed Yankees as they invaded the North. Mr. Lincoln would not stand for such a thing, but Mr. Grant was south, which left a Pennsylvanian in charge, General Meade, who would rather be home with his wife and children. It was the 1st of July, 1863, and two armies collided almost entirely accidentally. It was a tragic accident. A Union brigade had posted itself upon the lookout at the Lutheran Theological Seminary, just beyond Evergreen Cemetery. They blasted the encroaching Confederates with cannon fire as they nervously awaited reinforcement. Daniel, or Danny as his friends affectionately called him, was a wealthy planter's son from New Orleans. His father had a vast plantation growing sugar cane and hundreds of slaves. Most of these boys who found themselves here in Gettysburg gorging themselves to sickness on cherries and fruit were not rich, had never, would never own a slave, and were convinced they were fighting for their rights against government control. Daniel O'Neil, on the other hand, was the very pride and symbol of the Confederacy. His father, his grandfather, had told him the O'Neills were kings in Ireland before the English burned their castles, starved them out. His father, Aidan, was a Mexican war hero. Daniel was his only son. His mother, Louise, was French and was the debutante of her day. She was a rare, gorgeous creature like you'd find growing only deep in the swamps of Louisiana. A rare flower. That's what Daniel thought about his mother. Daniel rode a tall white horse of his father's breeding, called Puka. He was the smartest horse in the South. He wore a gray wool hat, trimmed in gold with a golden plume. His hair was wavy and dark, with an officer's beard and pale blue eyes. He, like his father, was tall, standing over 6 feet. His arms and legs were strong. Puka would not get used to the cannon fire, and Daniel couldn't blame him. He had received orders to join with General Hood's men, Georgians, North Carolinians on horseback amongst the little hills of Gettysburg. He found the place beautiful, and he missed the lush green of home. Chapter 16. Lee was charging across the dirt paths, under cover of 1,000 trees, pulled by 3 able horses when she saw her first rebel on the finest white horse she had ever seen. It was Daniel. She was wearing her white dress, and her long hair had come all undone. He liked the way she stared at him, like she had never seen a Confederate before. He reckoned she had not, and he liked being first. The cannon fire scared the girl half to death, the horses too. That rebel just sat on his horse and smiled at her like a king, letting her pass. She had the thought that they couldn't be all that bad. Besides, she was astounded and mortified with the fact that he was the finest man she had ever seen. He'd put Lancelot to shame. When she reached the wood farm, she found Jenny and Sarah waiting at the front door. "Oh, Lee, thank God, where is your father?" "He would not come." "No, Lee, the rebels are coming right down this road. I saw one." Ernest took his mother to the Derhofer place. "He's coming back for us. Why don't you take Sarah and head that way?" "And leave you?" "He should be back for me soon." "I won't leave you, Jenny." She unstrapped Fiona from the carriage. "All right, Fiona, you take the carriage." Sarah was crying for her mother. The cannon fire never ceased for a moment, and the horizon was black smoke. Passing Ernest on the way, they met at Fritz's house in safety. The air was so thick with smoke that it seemed to be after midnight, although evening was just drawing in. Shots echoed constantly in the distance like thunder. The moon hid her pale face behind a veil of smoke for shame. They had put the horses in the barn and huddled deep in the basement for cover. Sarah, a girl of 16, wailed considerably. The dampness was killing her. She needed her medicine. The dogs were drooling on her. Her mother, Jenny, and Ernest took turns coddling and comforting her. "I need a drink of water," she screamed and woke the baby. "Shh," Jenny stroked her hair. "Do you want them to find us here?" "Yes, they'll probably draw and quarter you." "Lee," Mrs. Wood snapped. Lee was just thankful that she hadn't taken Ernest up on his offer. Miss McBride was quite enough, and she was just the help. Poor Jenny. She snuggled a whimpering Shiner and worried about her father. They had brought mattresses, blankets, water, and fruit to the cellar, as well as 2 lanterns and several newspapers. As the night wore on, they attempted sleep. Lee lay there trying to say her prayers, but that handsome rebel was clouding her banging head. They would not know it for morning if it were not for the farmer's bones and hidden clocks. Lee wanted to venture up and see, but they would not let her. "Where is Mrs. Olson?" asked Jenny. "She's staying with her sister in New York. Her maid is reporting me to the authorities as a horse thief. It seems I am appropriately named after all." They all got a laugh out of that, except for Sarah, who thankfully was still sound asleep, her mouth hanging vulgarly open in a puddle of drool. They had a single tub of water, and that they shared to wash their faces and hands. There was also a single slop drawer that they all used to relieve themselves in, then emptying it in the far back corner. The ladies held it as long as they could, then hid it beneath their skirts, covering for one another. Sarah must have covered the jar in vomit 6 times until Lee could take it no more. "My God, don't feed her any more." Mrs. Wood found Lee to be unladylike and cold-hearted. She became a bit mad down there those days in the cellar. Then finally, after what seemed to be the 3rd day in the cellar, they heard something, not a musket or a shell. They heard something else. Somebody was in the house. They could hear them up there, tromping around, then talking, then screams, hideous, heart-wrenching screams. Ernest squinted at Fritz in the low light. Those kind of beastly screams were familiar to both farmers since Sharpsburg. Sometimes Ernest would wake in the night to those very screams of torture and futility, only to find himself dreaming, and Jenny asleep beside him. He still hoped he was dreaming now, but if so, he wasn't the only player. "Shh!" He now warned them to silence, and they were still. Then, after it seemed hours had passed, and Jasper started barking. Somebody up there had found the wooden trap door down to the cellar, lifted it, and called, "Hello down there!"